Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the Cold Fusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community. Welcome to Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition. It's episode 104, May 18th, 2021, and today I have Luis Mahana with me.
Howdy, Gavin. How are you?
Doing good. Good to have you here, and I'm sure everyone appreciates a fresh face on the podcast. Brad's on here every week.
Yeah, we don't miss Brad. We don't miss that guy.
Yeah, gotta give him a chance to do a little bit of work now and then, right? So.
Exactly.
Okay, well, first up, let's thank our sponsors, Order Solutions, the makers of CommandBox, CommandBox, ForgeBox, TestBox, and almost every other box out there. And without them, we wouldn't be able to do this podcast. So thank you, Otis. Thank you, Luis, for letting us do this awesome podcast every week. We appreciate it. So if you guys want to say thanks back to Otis, one of the best ways is to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you'll actually see when we're going live here. And also, we're hoping that we can reach that 500 mark. We're pretty close to the 500 subscribers. So if you guys can help us get there, that'd be awesome. Also, we have a service called CFCasts, which has free and paid accounts, and it has awesome new content every week. We'll tell you a little bit about that content coming up soon, but that's a good way to support us, even if it's just a free account. Having more people there learning about all the awesome things in Cold Fusion through our video service is a big deal, and would appreciate that. And also, 102 ColdBox HMVC Quick Tips and Tricks book is available on Gunroad, and you guys can grab that, and that's another way to say thanks back. So, and the next thing is we have awesome Patreon supporters, don't we, Luis?
Yes, sir. So we have our patreon.com. I'm trying to look for the link here so I can put it on the channel. And we have 37 patrons, so that's pretty cool. Providing about 84% of the funding for this podcast, so that's pretty cool. We're already starting to brew the ideas of what people can sponsor next. We're thinking even more podcasts, or actually just a ForgeBox hosting. So we do a lot for the community, and it's great to see people support us. And of course, if you do a bronze package, you get a CFCast subscription and a ForgeBox subscription.
Yep.
So thank you so much for assisting us and helping us out.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so let's get into the news and events. And one of the first things up this week, fresh off the book, so fresh, Brad hasn't even done the blog post yet. He's still working on it. But CommandBox 5.3.1 has been released. And there's lots of cool little fixes and everything in there, and a couple of new features. But one of the ones I just wanted to spotlight real quick is the sequel command, which is brand new in 5.3.1. And that's thanks to Scott Steinbeck and, of course, Brad. But what they allow you to do now is you can actually cat a JSON file in, pipe it into the SQL command, and do select ID, comma name, where name and then use percentage signs and everything, and then even do an order by and a limit. Basically, you can pipe JSON into the data, and then it'll do a query of queries filter on the fly, which is pretty neat. And so that powers a couple of things. There's a new table printer that Scott's been working on with Brad. And also there's a new import-export module that we'll talk about a little later as our ForgeBox module of the week. So that's just one of the cool commands that's in 5.3.1, and there's some other pretty cool stuff too. So I was pretty excited to see that. That's pretty neat. Just catting files in. It makes so much easier if you want actually doing some log crunching or something like that. You can pull in all sorts of file formats and just do SQL straight off the file. It's pretty neat. So have you seen that one yet?
I gotta talk to Brad to get his semantic versioning in check, since he's adding new versions as a patch level. We gotta reel him in through the ears and tell him that that's breaking semantic version there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know he had a couple of regressions he was patching, but at the same time, he's got new features he's throwing out there. So, yeah. I guess it should have jumped to 5.4, right? If there's more features in it.
Well, 5.4, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I think that the most important was the regression, and this was due to the update to the new Wirebox. And it's kind of tricky when we have several of these boxes, because the Wirebox version that he upgraded internally was a major one, right? And obviously we do when we do major versions, we do have the ability and the chance to let go of certain things from the past, right? And that's what happens with Wirebox, where the providers used to have a .get method, and that got got removed finally into a $get to avoid collisions with get methods, right? So unfortunately, this affected modules, right? So modules that were built for CommandBox, I think like the .env environment was affected by it since it was using providers. So basically anything could have been affected. So we're trying to do a patch there to make sure that people don't get into these issues. But obviously, there's so much stuff that sometimes these regressions just pop up and nobody basically reported it. So it was up to us to do it.
Yep. But found it, fixed it. So good stuff. So Brad will have that blog post out here pretty soon.
After the fact. Let's clarify that. It was reported after it was released.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. And that's why the testing is so important. Everybody's feedback is so important. So thank you for everybody who does do the testing and then obviously report when you do find something, so we can get it taken care of.
Yeah, exactly.
So yep.
Yeah, I know it affected some users, but at the end of the day, if people do not report things to us before we release, it's impossible for us to know every single aspect of it. So it's really important for the community to pitch in, and if they find something pre-release, that's when we can fix it. Fixing it after the fact usually brings headaches.
Yep. And usually the more people testing it, the more common use cases are picked up. And obviously we all test it. Brad gets on our case as well, saying, is everybody using it? I'm going to release it soon. I need this testing. So he's in our Slack channels on our case as well. So it's he's on everyone's case. So, but that's good. Usually it's pretty clean and not too many issues. Another release was let out there for a Fusion Reactor. So 8.7.1 was released. So basically they have improvements for the chat and reticent async tracking, which I'm not even sure what that is, as well as various bug fixes. But they did have a webinar last week, which we'll cover here shortly, so we'll share the recording, so maybe they'll highlight some of the new features in that as well. I know they're talking about moving from the premise to the cloud, but a lot of times, you can't help but talk about some of the new features, so it may be a little bit in there, but you can go to fusionreactor.com and then go to download Fusion Reactor to get the latest version there. And if you're using the CommandBox Fusion Reactor tool, it should automatically update because they're pretty Johnny on the spot with that stuff. So if it isn't there right now, it probably will be in the next day or so. We also had a ColdBox Validation 3.1 release. So you want to tell us about this? You got some pretty neat things in here I've seen.
Yeah, definitely. So there were several things on the pipeline that we were working with Will. I can't always say his last name, right? You have that expression.
Bruin.
So, but I call him Bill. I love Bill. And we've been working together with for CV validation for a while. There's still more to come, especially for localization and internalization. But there were a few things left. I grabbed them, and I needed a lot of stuff for ContentBox, since we're heading down here the release candidate route. So introduced several new concepts. The first one was a more functional approach to validation. As you can see from the blog post, it's basically just providing these callbacks so you can concatenate them and chain. So you can provide an on error and an on success closure, and it just reads really nicely. You can see what's not validated and what validated. And this gives you that decision path very nicely instead of a traditional procedural approach, right? Which is nothing wrong with it. It's just different, right? So when you see the functional approaches, they're very clean. They're very useful, especially for visualizing exactly what happens, right? So it's just like using those the Ajax libraries, or where you can say then and catch and stuff like that. Is providing that functional approach. We also created several new validators, so 6 new validators. And like I said, I needed these for ContentBox and for TimeBox, which is one of our secret SaaS services that will be coming up soon. Thanks to Eric, and actually I think it was you also that created that array item validator a while back, but we never added it to the core. So now it is. So it allows developers to actually apply constraints to every single item in an array. And so this is a really useful validator if you want to make sure that all the incoming items actually apply the same consistencies, right? And then a lot of date validators like after or equal, before or equal, or date equals. So it'll give you nice things where you can say, okay, if the start date has to be before the end date and the end date has to be after the start date. So it just gives you these nice constructs for you to work with dates and validation, right? Then Eric also sent me a few pull requests for required if and required unless, so it can be more flexible and looking into just single fields. And then we introduced new mixings, thanks to Eric Peterson as well, who wanted these in usage. So since we are a validation library, we introduced 3 new expressions. One is validate has value, so you can actually check for nullness or length on simple values, arrays, queries, structs, or objects. Very useful. Validate is null or empty. These are for simple values. And then I really wanted to introduce a really nice way to do assertions. I think this comes from TestBox and doing so much BDD and TDD, that I introduced just the assert expression. So basically allow it to pass an expression that has to evaluate to a Boolean value. And if it's true, then it will allow it to pass. So the code of execution will continue. However, if that expression evaluates to false or null, then it will throw an assert exception, okay? And this is really useful, especially when you don't want to be doing if statements and then throwing exceptions. You can actually just say, assert connection is not null. And then if that's true, then it continues, else you can choose your own message of exception. So bringing this native, which is native actually in Java, Java has a native assert function that you can enable or disable, as well as PHP. So I just wanted to bring that over to CFML because it's just useful, very useful.
Very cool. Yep. So we got a lot of cool stuff in that release. So yeah, good to see that out there. I like a few of those methods, especially like you say. There's a lot of boilerplate we end up doing ourselves. Just checking the validation. If there's an error, do this. I'll always do that, and yeah, it definitely makes the process a little more functional, smoother. So very cool. Okay, next up we also have a State of the CF Union survey. So this has been out for a while now, and I think we mentioned it a few times, but really the State of the Union survey is really important for a lot of people. It helps us figure out what everyone in the CF basically community is using inside of CFML. So we ask questions about frameworks and tools and different things about systems. So let me share my screen here and just give you sort of a quick little highlight of what's in there. But it's really important, like for framework developers like ourselves, like who's still using which versions of CFML. Like this question here may seem kind of funny, but when you're worried about how many people are using something that we may stop supporting, we want to upgrade, CommandBox 6, are we going to drop this version or that version? Who's still using which CF versions, etc. So it's kind of nice to see. We've got versions as well, but a lot of the stuff about testing, who's testing, what testing frameworks are they using, are they using Docker or not. So a lot of really important things in the survey, and basically we're at the point where they're going to start giving some details out, but I think they have a couple of hundred people already. I think last year we had almost 500 or 600 people that basically responded or whatever. So yeah. Okay, so basically you guys are listening and watching, so I'm sure you guys are all actually going to do the survey, so hopefully that can that's going to be done for sure. But what we need your help to get the word out to everybody else. So if you know other developers that don't listen to the podcast or don't follow people on Twitter, try and reach out to them. So send them an email, ask them to fill it out too, because it's really useful information. So really appreciate if you guys can to do that for us.
Yeah, we use that information a lot for keynotes and all that information. So it's really useful. I think everybody should just fill it out. It'll take you 5 minutes, and it really helps out to know the state of things. So.
Yep, for sure. So just wanted to remind you. We'll probably try and remind you as we go forward with that too. Also, we have another reminder about Adobe's Docker images. Bintray shut down May 1st, so if you want to get them, you can go to the ColdFusion downloads page now, and you can download a tar file with it. No word on if they're actually updating to like Docker Hub or another Docker service, registry service. So right now, if you want to use the ColdFusion images from there, you have to download them directly from Adobe. CommandBox still works the same way, so if you're using CommandBox, it doesn't matter. But if you're using the Adobe's images, he'll have to do that. So hopefully they'll have some news on that soon. But it didn't mention it was a temporary solution. I just assume it is. So hopefully we can get that fixed here pretty soon.
Yeah, I really, it really makes them look bad in all reality. So I hope they really are listening and they really get this fixed, because you know, everybody is in Docker Hub, you know, even Oracle, right? So you can get Oracle databases from there. So you know, they might come with the whole legal issue. I think Oracle has more legal issues than anybody, and they're there. So they actually make you, you know, do an agreement first, and then you can actually download it through Docker Hub. So yeah, please, those need to be there. But if not, people know the alternatives. CommandBox can run them. So hopefully they'll get their issues soon.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so next up we had a reminder about the Fusion Reactor webinar, Reach for the Clouds with Fusion Reactor. So we have the recording up there on YouTube. It was just posted this morning. And so that one, they're basically talking about the difference between on-premise version that they had, and they still support, versus the cloud version, which if you're using Docker or if you have different numbers of servers, the cloud version is really good. And it's really nice to be able to, you know, sort of look at a group of servers together. So if you have more than one instance running, the cloud version is really nice, because you can look at just that one node, or you can look at all of them combined. So it's kind of nice for that. So the cloud service is a really neat service. Yeah, so definitely check out that video. The Fusion Reactor are great. We love their product. We love them. They're good people. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I think it's the first time I don't see Charlie on the chat explaining things. So
yeah,
I probably told us what reticent means.
Yeah, well, today I'm wondering if everyone's over at Google I/O, because the Google keynote's on right now, and there's quite a few other things happening. So maybe our chat is a little light today. So, but yep. Okay, next up we have the Adobe webinar series for the API creation and management. So there was 7 in this series, Luis, and so far it looks like we've had the March 24th, 25th, April 28th, 29th, May 12th and 13th, and there's one left. May 24th will be the last one in the series. So it's been a great series. They do have a couple of the videos posted on the website. There's 2 right now. Hopefully they'll get the rest of them edited and put up there. But if you do want to check those out, there's a couple there. I think the first couple of videos. But yeah, Brian Sappy's been doing that series, and it's going really well. So we got links in the show notes for information about the series, and then you can obviously register. And the recordings, like I said, there's a few up there. Hopefully there'll be more coming soon here. So, but next up we have another
very,
webinar.
Very in-depth and detailed if you follow that. So great content.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to getting the rest of the videos posted so I can catch up on the ones I missed. So really excited about that. There's always something else to learn, some other tricks or tips that someone else is doing. So as much APIs as everyone's doing these days.
I'm going to make a contact here, just a reminder that maybe we can contact Kishore, and maybe we can do webinars for that API, ColdFusion API Manager on CFCasts. Maybe we can have our CFCast series for the API Manager.
Oh, okay, cool. That's a good idea. Okay. Next up, we also have another webinar. So Brad's going to be on May 21st, Friday, May 21st, 11 a.m. Central. Brad's going to be talking about what's new in CommandBox 5.3.x. So the 5.0 release, 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, and all the sub and patch releases are going to be showing that off. Now, he is working on a CFCast series for this right now, and so he's got lots of content, but he's going to be showing off some of his favorite features during this webinar. So if you want a little preview of what's coming in that series, this is definitely a good one. I'm always amazed the stuff that Brad can jam into these releases. I don't know how he gets any client work done with the amount of stuff he puts into CommandBox, but
We better go check some logs and see what's going on.
yeah, I know a lot of the client work does drive his ideas and features in here, so it's always good. But yeah, he's got a lot of good stuff. So that's actually this Friday. Wow, it's already the 18th today. I keep forgetting. So this Friday. So you can go register. We got this link here to register for that. And then if you want to keep in touch with all the other points, our webinar page at autosolutions.com/events/webinars have some, and they're actually available up on CFCasts as well if you've missed any of their previous Autos webinars. Okay, so that's our news for today. Bandwidth has been restored, and Luis is back to normal size for those watching. Sorry about that.
Woohoo!
We'll blame the weather, right?
Yeah, the weather here has been very nasty, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so next up we have our CFCast content. So you want to tell us a little bit about this new series Nolan's been releasing, this object-oriented programming?
Yeah, definitely. So I work with Nolan on this to get the outline going, curated the content. It's been a long process right now. Obviously, it takes time to get these things going. And I think we started in November of last year to curate the actual outlines of what I wanted in this course. And for me, it was very important to get this course done, especially with the history that exists in Cold Fusion, where the majority of developers are still not very comfortable with object orientation. And if they're doing it, they're just applying one approach to orientation. And I really wanted to make sure that we could empower developers that have been doing CFML for a long time and showcase them in an approachable way on how to take that knowledge that they have about in Cold Fusion and move it into object orientation line, right? So we go very deep in design patterns and making sure that people can know the software design around it, the software principles around it. So we wanted to take a really nice step into this, not do it just half-heartedly. We actually did invest a lot of time in making sure that the outline was correct, right, and taking them from step to step to completions. And we're also thinking about a part 2 where we can introduce basically mostly things focused around Wirebox, because that's the natural evolution. That once you start working with object orientation, working with objects becomes really you need to manage them, right? And that's where dependency injection frameworks come in. So very excited about this series. Nolan has done an impeccable job on the videos. He's such a talented teacher, and I cannot be more excited about this series. Because I think if people, Cold Fusion developers, take this seriously, they can really catapult their knowledge for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, it's really cool. And remember, the first 4 videos in the series are actually free. The rest of the series is you have to have a paid subscription. But the first 4 are free to check that out. Definitely pretty cool. And then this week we released the var scoping, static properties and methods, and encapsulation and cohesion videos. And then coming out later this week we have the abstractions, single responsibilities, and features of good code design, code reuse, extensibility, and testability. So a lot of good content there. I think we're already into we already have 10 videos out in that series, and we've got 3 more coming this week. So a lot of good content in there. And then we also released the last 3 videos of the CommandBox Zero to Hero workshop. So the cattle servers and service manager, CFconfig, and then guidelines for your code. So that whole workshop is basically up on CFCast now. If you're a paid member, you can access all of those videos. So I think that's the second full workshop we have up there now. So CFCast has got lots of great content. You can go check it out at cfcast.com.
Yeah, I actually was reviewing the series for DocBox and documenting your components, which is going to be something really, really cool. Michael Bourne is taking Spear there, and he's already got 4 videos done, and they're really excellent. So really, really nice. And also another important aspect for developers that they don't like to document. well, this will actually build the documentation for you. So that'll be a very, very nice one.
Yeah, DocBox is great. And then we have some Logbox 101 videos coming soon, up and running with Quick, and then more What's New with ColdBox 6 as well. I know there's a lot of videos in production right now, so we'll be bringing you more of that coming soon. So we'll let you know as they come on out. Okay, so that's our CFCast update. Next up, we have conferences and training. So Adobe's Cold Fusion Developer Week, June 22nd to the 24th, and that's going to be online and free. And they actually updated their website today, so let me pull that up for those who are watching. And I'll show you. They've got some updates on there. So they got the counter. So 34 days, 10 hours, 2 minutes, and 6 seconds. So you better register now. They got a little information about it, but they've actually put up some of the speakers up here. So you see that there's a pretty good little lineup of speakers on that list. So Brian Sappi, Brian Klaus, Ben Nadell, Charlie Earhart, Dan Wilson, Dave Ferguson, myself, Luis, Mark Takata, Pete Freitag, Raymond Candom. So a lot of good speakers in that list. I actually have some scheduling issues, so I may not be able to do that. We're discussing options for that right now, but definitely good content there. You guys should check that out. It's free again, and it's basically like a mini CF Summit, so definitely worth checking that one out. So that's going to be, again, June 22nd to 24th. And Luis, can you tell us what you're talking about yet? Do you know what you're speaking about it there, or is it a top secret?
I am. So unfortunately, the last Cold Fusion summit that I did was a little fiasco where Adobe Connect did not like my Mac, and it was almost virtually impossible to do it. So we kind of got out my cowboy style hat and basically did a new Zoom connection and our webinar there. But it was all over the place, unfortunately. So it will be a repeat. It will basically be building your apps with ContentBox. So the cool thing will be that I will be able to showcase actually the full API at that point because it's done. So it's going to be basically showcasing all the power that you can do with a headless CMS and Cold Fusion. So very excited about that. Hopefully they won't be using Connect, or if they do, just they got to make it work.
Yeah. So we'll see. I think for some reason we were using Zoom last time at CF Summit, but I don't know if that was because it was a conference software was connected to it. So it looks like they're using vConfix. That's the name of the site that you can register. So I'm not sure if it's special conference software and they'll have something built in or not. But
yeah.
But
I'm gonna make sure that I get with them at least a week in advance and making sure that that actually works.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so in case you missed it, AWS Summit Online was last week, so the AWS conference, a lot of great content there. The second day was more case studies, but the first day was more services. They had a lot of sessions, and if you go to the event now, you can still register and get access to the videos for that, so you can access them on demand. So that was a good conference. And this week, which is probably where half the people that are usually in our chat, heckling us, they're probably at Google I/O right now because it starts today and it goes for 3 days. It's online and free for everybody, so there's a lot of good content there. Products like Firebase and Flutter. Obviously, Google's got Chrome and developer tools and other things too. So a lot of good content at that, and that is free. And if you go to events.google.com/io, you can find out more about that. And I'm wondering if I just go there live right now, do we see a video or do we have to actually sign in? Oh, look, watch now. So if you guys want, yep. And they have interpreters too for sign language, which is pretty neat. So yeah, so it's happening right now. So I'm sure when you guys are done here, tune in and find some out with that. But yeah, so up next, I think they have the developer keynote, and then they have what's new in Android and what's new in Google Play. So a lot of cool stuff there. So that's happening this week. And then next week we have Microsoft Build. So Microsoft's not the same Microsoft we used to know, right, Luis? As developers, Microsoft is not a good word to say if you're developing, but they got so much good
Yeah,
stuff
no, to
now.
me, they're doing a fantastic job. They're just kicking it, man. So I really enjoy using their products now. I cannot say that Windows has bought me over yet. I still have lots of gripes with it, but the rest of the tooling, I'm really happy with it.
Yep. So Microsoft Build, obviously there's .NET stuff, but there's other stuff like VS Code. I mean, their whole GitHub acquisition was pretty big. So a lot of
Yeah.
interesting stuff there. So if you go to mybuild.microsoft.com, you can find out more about that conference. And again, that's next week. And yeah, a lot of great stuff. Some pretty big speakers if you look through the list. But yeah, a lot of different things. I like the way they sort of break things down into channels too. But they have digital swag too, so I'm kind of
Oh, cool.
curious. I wonder what that is. But yeah, again, 3 days: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So and then starting May 13th. So already you can actually go and schedule your streams and figure out what you want to go see. So that is next
Sure.
week. Okay. And then one of our favorites, DockerCon, is going to be next week as well. So May 27th. So it's just a 1 day online conference. And as usual, they have lots and lots of basically, I guess, tracks. And so you guys can pick the content that's relevant to you. So again, online and free. And some pretty big names on this list as well here. And if you can see, watching online, you can look at their agenda. There's a lot of stuff. So,
They always have such an amount of content. It's crazy.
yeah, I know. It's really enjoyed the conference. I'm kind of looking forward to when they go back in person because there's just so much good stuff, and yeah, it's just not the same online. But again, that's another great conference next week. So May 27th. So docker.com
Very cool.
slash dockercon-live 2021. And then coming up in June as well, we have the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference as well. That'll be June 7th through 11th. So we'll tell you more as we get closer. Now for Audis, we have a couple of conferences scheduled for later this year too, Luis. And so we have Into the Box, which we've been going back and forth a little bit about if it's going to be online or in person. We're planning online, but everything's changed a little bit lately. So we sent out a survey. You want to give us a little sneak peek into what the survey's saying yet, or is it still top
Yeah,
secret?
definitely. No. We can put the survey. Actually, I'm going to put it here so people can actually fill it out, and then we can put it in the show notes. It's basically deciding if people, what comfort level they would feel if we did the conference live here in Texas. The whole COVID situation here in Texas is really it's really good, right? The mask mandates are pretty much almost over everywhere. I think that COVID deaths we've had 0 in the past 2 months here. So the COVID situation in Texas per se has been fantastic in the sense that it's not crazy anymore. Lots of freedoms returning. I think businesses are 100% open. The restrictions are basically being removed. Vaccination is really high. So that's why we were like, oh, maybe we should consider doing it in person, right? And obviously it's not now. It wouldn't be now. It would be until September. So that even gives us, June, July, August, September, almost 4 months from now, where the situation, God willing, will be even better. So anyways, the survey is up. Very, very simple survey. It's just to gauge your comfort level if you would come here to Texas to the conference for 2 days or not. That's pretty much it. The conference is going to happen no matter what. So the question is, are we going to do the same model as last year, or we're just going to do it live? That's the survey to gauge. So need your help. People can go in there, click the link. Also we will put it in the show notes. But it's important for us to kind of gauge comfort levels. When it started, it was kind of like 50-50. It was very divided. And now the pendulum keeps swinging left and right. So we just need more feedback.
Yep, for sure. And then there's a little box you can say why too, because some people have said, that their company just won't let them travel, and other people, it's up to them on their thing. And like I said, we're not judging anybody. Obviously, you look after you and your decision. You got to make the best decision for you. We're just trying to see, if there's enough people to make it worthwhile, and sort of go from there. So it's obviously, yeah, a lot of people are saying, I'm vaccinated, I'm coming,
Yeah.
and other people like, I'd love to, but yeah, work can't, whatever. So, yeah, so, no
Yeah,
judge.
and it's difficult. It might be that the situation is okay, right? But the issue is that the companies are still not releasing, their employees to actually travel and do training, right? So there's still a hesitance on that area. So we understand that area when there's some people that are vaccinated and they're like, okay, where is it? I'm there, right?
Yeah,
I wanna not stay in my house, right? So we see all spectrums, and if we can get it good enough reasoning, we'll kind of do it. Now, as far as the Orchis team, most likely we're all gonna be here, so that would be a nice thing to have where we can all be together.
yeah. And as Phil mentions in the chat, there are so many travel restrictions, and that's definitely true on international travel. Inside the U.S., it's a lot less restricted, and it depends on where you're leaving from and going to. And but yeah, with the CDC coming out and saying that basically they're dropping all inside mask restrictions coming up, but every county and state can obviously still have their own rules. We're not really sure what's going to happen. And then obviously this is
Yeah,
later into
exactly.
September, so I'm sure Memorial Weekend will be a big one. The last big surge was right after Thanksgiving and
Yeah.
Christmas, so we haven't had any big surges lately, but Memorial Weekend might be the one if it's going to happen. So I know California is waiting for June 15th just to sort of see what happens right after that before we open up almost 100%. So, but
California has been waiting on just the fact of waiting.
yeah, then maybe that too. But also, you look at a few graphs, we're pretty low on the vaccination scale too. So, but yep. But anyway, each their own. But yeah, that's what we're looking at. If not, it'll be online, and we'll have the call for speakers out pretty soon. But obviously, the call for speakers matters if we're doing online or not. So that's why we've been pushing it back a little bit, trying to make that decision. Because, yeah, we can't have somebody from Europe speaking if they can't travel here if we do it in person. So, and then obviously Into the Box Latam in December. That's on the schedule as well. And then I guess we'll be waiting to see on that one as well. Are you planning to just do that one online just to be safe for international travel reasons?
Yeah, well, mostly since this occurs mostly in El Salvador and neighboring countries. Um, at this point, that might seem that it might be more of a reality than anything, especially since it's all the way until December. And
Okay.
El Salvador at this point is still okay. It's not doing really bad at all. So again, we're monitoring the situation. We're running surveys as well. But at this point, this has a higher percentage to be on site than anything.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, that wraps up our conferences for this week. So let's go look at some blogs, tweets, videos of the week. So we have a few here from Matthew Clemente. He's been working with Postgres a lot lately. He's been sharing that, so it's kind of cool. And apparently, thanks to his ignorance, which I don't think he's an ignorant person at all, he's pretty smart. But he says Postgres is an ongoing source of, today I learned. So basically, he's talking about intervals in this first one, and I'm going to share my screen for those watching, those listening, sorry. But basically, he was talking about how to use intervals in Postgres. So
Hmm.
these are really cool. I've used these recently with a client too. So, previously you would do select star from book where completed at, and then you'd put, a date. You'd say before, then you have a string 04/18/2021 and put the time in there. Basically create your own string version of a timestamp for SQL to read. And that's okay, but it kind of gets tricky when you start doing some crazy math. But with intervals, you can do things like select star from book where completed at is now minus interval, and then an interval you can put all sorts of things, and his example has 30 day. And so basically the code now minus interval automatically calculates 30 days in the past. And as he said, this was like a mind-blowing moment for him, because not only can you do days, you can use milliseconds, seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, decades, centuries, millenniums. It's very much like some of the JavaScript, date modules where they try and give you more fluent ways to use it. So if you do an interval and then in quotes put a number and then your unit, it'll take care of a lot of that for you. So he gives a few examples here, like if it's completed at is greater than now minus interval 1 year, 137 days, 12 hours, and that would actually work. Pretty crazy. So just give some examples here.
I really like that. It's very cool because it's more human. It's easier to think in intervals than to actually think in the actual date formats. So yeah. Fantastic. I'm wondering if MySQL has intervals. That's pretty cool.
Yep, and obviously you can use it not just on wheres but on inserts and everything too. And yeah, the SQL that he has is just so much more readable using the interval.
Yeah. So they actually do. That's great. So MySQL also has intervals. Very nice.
Yeah. And that's one thing I've noticed
so you
too.
Just say interval, 1 day, 3 days, minutes, years. Very cool. Did not know this.
Yeah, and see,
why haven't we been using this, Gavin? That's nuts.
I know. That's the thing is with Postgres, what I've learned with this client is that a lot of the cool stuff that they have, other people have too, because Postgres is really well known for sticking to the SQL standard. So if it's in the SQL standard, they adopt it and they use it, and for that reason, other people may have it too. So yeah, some other stuff that I used with them, I was like, ooh, they have these too in SQL, and I started using them over in MySQL as well. So yeah, it's been a fun experiment, working on other projects, especially with developers that know the system inside and out. So we have also the blog post from you, which is about the CB validation release. So we did mention that a little bit, but just wanted to highlight that blog post again. So, and again, thanks to Will and Eric. But yeah, if you want to do the what's new right here, you can go straight to that. And that has all the changes specifically with that version. And then most of our documentation, you will notice, is a release history, and it has the version, so you can go back to specific versions and see what's new and just those specific versions if you're looking for upgrades and that type of thing. So it's good to know. Okay, so also a quick little one here. Zach Spitzer shows a little interesting try-catch trick using CF Echo. And so I don't know if you'd seen this one before or not, but if you do a try-catch in Lucee, if you actually want it to output the error nicely using the error template, you can just try something, throw it, and then you can just echo the exception, and it'll output it in the normal, Lucee error catcher, which is pretty neat. So I thought that was
I thought that was pretty neat, especially for capturing. I'm thinking like bug reports or things of that nature would be very nice.
Yeah, so that way, it treats it like nothing happened, that the catch didn't happen, but you can do whatever you want around it and then just echo it out like normal. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so this was an interesting one. We actually missed one of Adam's blog posts last week about CF Wheels. Adam was talking about how he didn't like their testing tool, and so he's got a new one here, and let me share my screen. But basically, CF Wheels, he's running TestBox instead of Rocket Unit for his unit tests. And he basically discussed the merits of his own, albeit third-party testing framework with CF Wheels. And his article was called Testing a Horror Story. So you can probably figure out his opinion of Rocket Unit from that. So we didn't want to bash on another system, so that's why we didn't go over that blog post. But if you want to read it, you can here. So this is basically showing how he got TestBox up and running in CF Wheels. So if you're using CF Wheels and you want to look at TestBox, he shows some of the things that weren't so obvious to him, because TestBox obviously works great with CommandBox because we built them together and they work great. That's part of the way you built them, right, Louis? So everything just works, and we have test helpers for testing handlers and different base test specs depending on what you're trying to test. And so this blog post goes through and gives you some sort of tips on what he found not obvious and how you can go ahead and test. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's when we built TestBox, obviously as a replacement to MX Unit, I remember when I was adding the BDD approaches and all that. I mean, CommandBox is extremely test centric, right? We're huge proponents of both BDD and TDD, and that's just the way the framework is built, right? So when we actually built TestBox, CommandBox 4 was built because there were so many regressions that we found and so many issues that we found because we were finally applying the majority of the test coverage. And I think the final test coverage that Brad had on the report was like 87% for CommandBox or something like that. So we are very big proponents of testing. I love reading and geek out on all the blog posts that Adam writes about testing because obviously that's extremely dear to my heart, right? I know the value of it firsthand, right? When you make a small little change and it regurgitates everywhere, right? And you're like, oh my God, that was just a small change, right?
Yep.
But without test coverage, without applying a test-driven approach, it's really like basically driving blind. You are, because you're basically just waiting for the crash instead of actually being able to detect the crash and actually resolve it. So, that's, I think, a big difference. And I go through, I read it, and then I see all the loops and hoops he's trying to make sure that to get testing going. And I know how different it is because I we had to do it for CommandBox, right? So,
Yep.
Yeah, so really nice blog post. He goes really in detail. I think he's still going to be messing around with it to make sure that he can get it working, but I'm glad he's using TestBox.
Yeah, for sure. It's great insight, and I thought the highlight for me was it just shows us how lucky we are using CommandBox of all those little things built in and tweaked, and we have that from the scratch. Obviously, you can test other apps that aren't built in CommandBox. That's one thing with TestBox. You can test your legacy code and everything else too. But yeah, sometimes you got to jump through some hoops, and we try to make CommandBox, jump through those hoops for you, make it easier. So, but yeah, so thanks Adam for that. So next up we have one with Ben Adele, and this one is talking about how get base tag data works differently in Adobe ColdFusion and Lucee. So this was interesting.
Yeah, I heard Brad and you talking about this on last week, right?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about some of the differences here, and so he basically goes into more detail. And as Ben talked about here, he's been using his ColdFusion custom tag DSL for HTML emails at Envision, and he's been rolling it out. It's been doing great, and so he wanted to start using it for his blog. But of course, Envision now runs on Lucee, and his blog runs on Adobe ColdFusion 2018 still. And so he went to implement it and had some major differences in the way they work. And so apparently the documentation for Lucee and ColdFusion both line up, so they look the same, but the way that the ancestral levels work is very different. And so, I mean, basically what he's doing is trying to get some parent type information out of his custom tags. And so he just explains it pretty well. Lucee ancestral levels is basically the number of custom tags in the hierarchy to skip before starting to search for the given tag name, whereas ColdFusion ancestry levels is the instance number of the given tag to return while traversing it. So 1 would return the first instance and 2 would return the second instance, where the other one is it's basically would it start looking the parent or the parent. So it's just a little difference, but again, I thought it'd be good to spotlight there are differences, and you don't really know half of them until you run into something like this. So.
Oh yeah.
So again, but in the comments, which was nice too, he was talking about updating docs for Lucee for the compatibility note, and so Zach helped him get to the right place. So hopefully there'll be a note in there. So next time someone runs into this, the documentation should help them. So pretty cool. Okay, now this one I thought would be a neat one for you, since you like. Well, I don't know if you like the Elvis Operator, but it's a neat little trick.
When it works.
Yeah.
When it works, right?
Yep. So Ben Adele.
Yeah, I think unfortunately Adobe has maybe hate the Elvis Operator because they introduced it in 2016 and never worked. 2018 it kind of worked. So I basically can't use it on any of our libraries because I never know what I'm gonna get, right? So, but it is powerful when it works.
Yep. Yeah, and so basically with this one here, what he's doing is a basic sort of pagination type approach. And so he's got previous letter and next letter and like an array. But basically what he's doing is he's using just to check and see if it's a valid place. So if you're basically at the end of the array and you try and do the next item, it's not going to be valid, right? And so using the Elvis operator, he can basically just default it to letters dot first. So in other words, you go back to the start of the array if you're already at the end. If you're at the beginning of the array and you try and do a previous and you got like a 0 index, then obviously that'll basically not work, and so then you'll go to the end of the array. So I just one of the use cases I never even thought about for it, but and so.
Yeah, the Elvis operator for me is a fantastic construct, like I said, when it works. And the cool thing is that you can even chain it. So that's also very useful because you can create these chains of expressions where, if this is null, then move here. And if also this is null, then move here, right? So it does give you that power.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you're in Adobe 2016 and 2018, I would say avoid it. And I know, and in previous Lucee versions, I think finally Lucee 5.3.7, sorry, I think it's one day. I finally covered the majority of the use cases, but it's been a real pain for me to use.
Yeah, for sure. So, yep, that was, like I said, a good little use case I hadn't thought of. And then here's another
Very
one.
nice. I really like that.
Yeah. And then here's another one that Ben wrote about a pro tip using the say voice synthesis command after a long-running task. So this was kind of a little efficiency hack one. And so basically, he's got a little video for it, which is neat, but he's working in a CLI, and so sometimes these jobs take a while or whatnot. And so basically he put a say command at the end of it, and he uses like a little alias too. So basically when the CLI command is done, it'll actually say something to you. So I think, Brad, we should add something into CommandBox that'll actually tell you when one of your task runners is complete if you want to. And that way when it's done.
Well, this is a Mac thing, right? So I don't know if this exists in Linux or Windows, but in the Mac, it's great because you can do this, you can change the voice, you can do all that stuff. So, and I think that's the power of CommandBox, right? Where it can actually tap into the operating system binaries and just use whatever is in the operating system.
Yep. I know there's going to be a Java component somewhere that we can use if you're on Windows as well, though, because it could be kind of fun. But yeah, it's one of those things, multitasking. You've got a task running, and when it's done, you need to go do something else. So a little voice trigger, pretty neat. So
I liked it. I really enjoyed it. I think I'm going to be adding it.
Thanks for sharing.
Too funny. So
I'm
next,
going to be adding these my test box runners.
Yep. So the next one is another one from Brad, and so this is actually, have you taken the State of the Union survey? Obviously, we already talked about this a little bit, but here's an example of the type of data that we can get out of this survey. And so, those of you watching, you can see. Otherwise, you can check out the blog post. But which version of CFML engine do you use? And you're meant to check all that apply. So it's kind of interesting that 2021 is almost got 40 people out of the 200 respondents that are already using it. CF 2018 is almost half the people are using that. Lucee, we have over half, and obviously you can check more than once. So, but you can look at the different versions too, so you can see like CF 10 and 11, they've still got a decent number of people using it. CF 11, yeah. So this is the type of information you can get out of it, and obviously there's a lot of things. And if you look through our blog post too, we have stuff from last year. So if you want to check out 2020s, you can see the results from that as well. So, but I just want to spotlight that little graph there. I thought it was neat. Okay. And then, so next up, we have a guide for Lucee, installing and running Lucee with CommandBox in Ubuntu 20.04. My gosh, I feel ancient. The versions just keep on flying, man. 20?
I know.
We're already at 20?
We're already at 20, man.
Oh, great.
Actually, Ortus HQ is running on 20, so yeah.
Yep. So this one here is kind of nice. They do have a video too, so you can actually skip a first couple of steps. But this is basically sort of an old school server install. You're still using CommandBox with Lucee, but sort of goes through the different steps. And So this is one of their recommendations. Obviously, each to their own. But I just like the walkthrough kind of guides. Sometimes you still need that. But I mean, they're using SSH forwarding as well. Setting up the JDK. Now, I wonder. Let's see. Okay, they're using the Debian install. Okay. But yeah, so they walk through the steps here, so this is pretty good. And obviously this is part of their doc, so if you find something that you want to add to it or whatnot, we can always make a pull request and update that too. So Brad should probably look this over and make sure that it's up to Brad levels of standards. But yeah, so it's a nice to sort of see this whole walkthrough process, because not everyone uses Docker, right, Luis?
Yeah, no, definitely. The more guides, the better, right? So everybody has their own workflows. Everybody has their own approaches. So everybody does it differently. So it's great to see the different flavors of people, how they do it. And you always learn, you always learn from these approaches and something that you can integrate into your own approach. So I really enjoy the guides.
Yep. So we also have a tweet from Brad. So he gives out a couple of Lucee tricks. So did you know about this one, Luis? That you can pass a Java input stream into toString and get back a single string without having to loop over the string manually?
No, I thought that was pretty fantastic. I know I used the toString method. I actually was using it a few days ago because I was building the CommandBox REST API, and I was getting these Boolean cannot cast string to Boolean exceptions, and it was driving me nuts. And the issue was that when the JSON gets deserialized and there's a true there or a false, it actually, casts it to a native Java Boolean. And when you're trying to then populate an ORM object with those values and send them to be saved, Hybrid basically considers those as Booleans. So it was so bizarre. And then obviously the toString method comes to the rescue, right? So basically it's a glorified cast. And but I have to check the source code and see what other kind of magic it's doing.
Wow. Yeah. Actually, funnily enough, you mentioned the true false stuff. There's another tweet from James Moberg about that in a minute. But the other tip was you can, arrays can be dereferenced as like array and then in square bracket 42 to get the item, and that's pretty common. But you can also use array dot and then the number 42. So the dot or the array notation actually works, and they both work the same.
Interesting.
Kind of interesting.
That worked actually.
Yeah, the dot 42 was I never would have thought about that. Thought it would have freaked out for having a number first in there. But no, that works. And so a tweet from Brad. And then we'll just jump forward one real quick to talk about James Moberg's yes no versus true false. And I have actually personally been bitten by this one, so that's why it really stood out to me. So I want to mention it. But so in Cold Fusion, yes and no strings are allegedly treated the same as Boolean values, but Boolean values are not yes no. So basically, this one I think it's only because of the CFHTTP. I haven't seen it in a lot of other places, but this is one place for sure. So basically, if you're there's a I don't even remember what the value is for. Is it for secure? I'm not sure, but basically, if you use yes and no CFHTTP for one of the attributes, works fine. But if you use true or false, it will throw an error at you. You basically have to use the yes no format on a Boolean value. You can't use true or false. You have to say yes or no. And it was one of the attributes on the CFHTTP, and so. Yeah, but basically his workaround was say, make sure you use the yes/no format function to make sure it's not a true/false. Isn't that crazy? So
that is crazy, man.
So I'm not sure if that because it ties straight into something else, but the funny thing is, you'd think if it was, you'd need a true/false, not a yes or a no. But anyway, okay. So back to Matthew Clemente, and this kind of ties into Brad's one too. Something I didn't know if you could do elsewhere. Guess you'll have to verify for me in a minute here, Luis. But did you know that if you want to order by columns in Postgres, you can just say order by one descending and then comma 2, and it will take the first and the second from your select statement. And so if you want to group by, you can just do group by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it'll group by those fields. You don't have to write out the names of them all, etc. So you can just use the number of the column in your select statement, and you can use that for group bys and orders.
That is cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat too. Again, that's another one I found out with Postgres, but I don't know if that one's in other ones. So yeah, it's just really pretty quick when you're doing some SQL. And then Scott said that actually does work in most SQL databases and even query of queries as well. So there you go. So one of those things we just didn't know. So again, if you want to find out more, Matthew Clemente's blog has all of that in there. Pretty neat.
That is very sweet. I'm actually going through it. I'm like, I could have used that.
Yep.
Instead of putting the right ones, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you got some complicated, select statements.
Yeah.
And then next up, we have one that we missed a couple weeks back from Vil de Bruijn. Sorry, I'm trying to say it right, honestly.
Oh my gosh. It's difficult.
So this is using CommandBox Lucee for production. And so this one here, Will had some issues basically, and so he wanted to just spotlight some of the things you may not know about CommandBox and how it works a little differently. And so so this blog post, like he said before this, up to recently, he would always recommend saying, yep, CommandBox and production, no problem. But this blog post just sort of highlights a couple of the issues he ran into. And so we just want to make sure that we're clear, because CommandBox is a little different than a normal server install, and so we want to be sort of clear about that there. And obviously,
I think that's very important to distinguish the differences, right? Because we go on the premise of servers as cattle, right? Where things can be destroyed at any point in time and you get a new server, right? That's the whole magic of CommandBox, right? But when you start using it for production, obviously there are these caveats, right? And I know Will was trying to update and the settings were lost, and in reality, when you do a server update, that server is gone, right? It's removed, it's deleted, right?
Yep.
And then you have to basically, it installs a new version that's patched, right? But obviously you have to recreate what you did, right? And that's a tricky part. And I think we have to do a better job of explaining that in the docs in a more bold manner, right?
Yeah.
Because if you just want to patch, and another issue might be like if you have the specific version of the engine in your box.json, that also will do an auto update for you, right? So you have to be very explicit on which version and even build number to pin it, right?
Yep.
For example, on our Docker images, we actually do the full pin, right? We're pinning to 537, right? And then when there's a new version, right, we actually build a new Docker image, which the new version, let's say 538, and we make sure that all the things and that there's no regressions, right? But that's because we live in our Docker world. But if you're not living in a Docker world and just using it for production, right, these caveats exist, right? Obviously, it's not a perfect tool, right? But you have to be aware, because it definitely bit Will in the butt, right? And obviously that's not something nice, especially when you have system admins doing this kind of stuff, and system admins, they always complain about everything, right? They just want the easy button for everything, right?
One thing though, when you said you pinned it to 5.3.7, and that's one of the things Will points out here, is if they release a build 537 build 48, it'll actually update. So you need to pin.
It will change.
Yeah, you need to pin that plus 47 as well. Yeah, exactly. So and so that's something that can bite you, and and the same thing with Docker. If you have your Docker, saying 537, when Docker starts, it's going to update to that new version every single time too. So your Docker images might be slow, and you're like, why are they so slow? That's because it's updating. So there are some, there's obviously benefits to CommandBox, but there are some, some negatives like that. And and in the chat, Scott's talking about using like a box lock or a package lock type thing, and we've talked about that, and that's the other thing we wanted to mention with this blog
Yeah, we've
post
talked
too.
about it, and I think it's getting more momentum into getting built. Obviously, it won't be exactly like package log. Package log does things differently, but we have had this conversation for quite some time now, right? Because and here's another issue. This is because of the package manager, right? The package manager goes on semantic versioning, right? And there's a lot of semantic versioning constructs that tell you, hey, bring me the latest major, bring me the latest minor, bring me the latest patch, bring me the latest build, right? All this is part of the semantic release of the package manager itself. So this not only applies to the engine, which is in itself a package, but it applies to anything that is a package in box.json. So if you want to pin things, you got to pin them to the right build number, right? Because if not, then basically there is a potential to basically do auto installs of things that you don't want. And this goes for any package manager. That's just the way it is, right? So the resolution for NPM was to introduce a package lock where things can be locked until you actually remove it, and then you can actually do these kinds of locks. So we are in the process of introducing these box locks, right? So you don't have to be worrying about these things. You can actually just have that file, right, that locks the versions that you're using. But just as a caveat, this is the way the package managers work, right? You just have to know that it's not very something straightforward for it, and I think we have to do a better job in our documentation to just advise people more about these features, right? Because these features become issues for certain people when they're using them, right? And so I definitely it's important to know the pinning, right? And here's a very interesting story, so also Will doesn't feel bad, where we get the pain. So on the earlier versions of ForgeBox, when we're dealing with all these package managers and all the stuff that we're dealing, we're like, oh, this is so cool, this is so amazing, right? We use ForgeBox to build ForgeBox. We got to a point of an endless loop, Gavin. I don't know if you remember this.
Oh, I remember this one.
ForgeBox was down for like a day. And mostly it was because of Fusion Reactor, actually. So not that Fusion Reactor was failing, but we hadn't locked Fusion Reactor and pinned it to the right version. So every time we actually started ForgeBox again, right, ForgeBox was down. Like all the containers had gone down. So then basically we're in this endless loop where ForgeBox could never go up because it was trying to get to ForgeBox, to get Fusion Reactor, to start up the engine. Oh my God, it was nuts. So we've learned our lessons the really painful way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so there was something else in the blog post I wanted to highlight too. So, like you said, when you start a new server, it installs a new server, and so it's like starting from scratch. And like CFconfig is really good, where it'll load up your settings into your server automatically. But if someone logs into the old Lucee admin and changes things, there's no way to get those settings easily. So what Will was saying is you have to basically use CFconfig to export your current Lucee settings out, and then import them in. I mean, you could have, we could build a little. We talked about doing stuff where it auto exports out all the time, but then when you do that, you get every setting that's in Lucee, and so then you got hundreds and hundreds of lines to look for the right one. And so it's just things to know, like, usually what we sort of do is we don't touch the Lucee admin once you deploy a Docker one, because it's going to disappear.
Exist.
Yeah,
and I think that's part of the operating procedure, right, Gavin? So in all reality for us, there is no admin, right?
Yep.
There is no way to change things. Right? Yep. The only way to change things is through the CFconfig file. So that means a redeploy. And yes, it cannot be straightforward for folks that are relying on the way the Cold Fusion has worked for thousands of years, right? Which is you go to the admin, you do your changes, your tweaks, and then everything works. And then to recreate that was always been a pain. That's why we built CFconfig, right? So, but yeah, that's a very good point, Gavin, because that bites you hard, right? Well, somebody comes in, makes these small tweaks to make things work and everything, and they expect that to always be the same. And this bites you, right? It bites you because, that's the whole point of of this approach, right? Which is the cattle approach, right? It's that gets destroyed, a new one comes in, right? You repopulate it with all the new stuff, and there it goes. But so very important caveats. Taking my notes here as well, so we can make sure that we can go through some of the docs and make sure we put these as warnings, right? because people are used to the old approaches, right? They might not be used to the new approaches. And if you don't have that operating procedure in place, then it bites you.
Yep. And that was one of the things Will said in the blog post too, is that, sysadmins don't read all this very specific issues. They don't know how CommandBox works. They don't know the differences, and that's why a lot of people are moving towards Docker, because it kind of encapsulates all that, it handles all that, and then you give a Docker image to a sysadmin, it's easy, right? I mean, because it behaves like all other Docker admin containers.
Yeah. Unless you don't pin the Fusion Reactor version, Gavin.
Well. Okay, but still, they can start and stop it. If it breaks, they contact you, I guess. But anyway, I mean, the other issue that we've also been discussing internally is, when you upgrade a server, you have to have things just right if you're using extensions that have licenses as well. And so that was another issue that Will ran into. And basically the licenses, we sort of have two sets of licenses, right, Luis? I'll let you explain more. But we basically have like single server licenses, and then we have like Docker container-like licenses. So the single server one, when you start it up, you basically activate the license, and then you're good. And then with the Docker ones, it starts up and shuts down, and there's a lot more communication going on, and that allows for more activations and deactivations on a Docker license. But because of the way CommandBox works, if you upgrade your CommandBox Lucee version, it does a whole new fresh install for the server. So it's like a whole new activation for the activation license. So we've been internally talking about this.
Yeah, this has been going on and I helped Will with this issue, and licensing is not easy. When we did it with Brad, the whole licensing modules for Hortus, I mean, they're pain. And we actually try to do the more constrained approach of not calling home all the time and going crazy with licensing and all that. But it's still hard. It is definitely hard, and that's the issue, right? The license is actually created out of the Lucee identifiers, right? So it's bound to that specific instance, right? Because we're licensed on a specific Lucee instance. And if that Lucee instance gets destroyed or upgraded, right, in the CommandBox approach, it's a new server, right? So the license basically borks because it's like, hey, I'm not activated for this new server. Right? So that's when we introduced the Docker activation approach, where we could pre-activate a license so it could be used on multiple Lucee IDs, right, without getting into this issue, right? So that's the issue that Will hit, is basically the license was not, it was a new server, so it complained, and it's like, you have to redo the whole process, right? So we have to get with Will and basically go through the whole Docker activation process, because he's destroying, bringing servers up through the updates, right? Now, you can also, as a reminder, you can also update Lucee by just dropping a jar, right, in the patches, and that will update it as well, right? So you don't have to use the CommandBox update if you don't want. If you don't want things to change, you don't have to, right? Yeah. You can go into the admin and update it through the admin, and you're done, right? So
that's what I ended up doing.
You now
so
are relying on that, right?
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's just, and developers, like I said, it's easy for us, but there's a few more complications when you're doing production, and so, and so Will sort of highlights a lot of the ones they hit, and he says it's a wonderful tool, but if you're losing it for production servers, you need to know what you're doing, and and things get a little more complicated. So, yep. So again,
I think it always goes down to an operating procedure, right? Because when you were dealing with Adobe Cold Fusion 10 years ago, you had a certain procedures. When you're dealing with them now, it's a different procedure, right? Yeah. And when you're using CommandBox, you have to have another procedure. So as you know, I'm a big fan of these operating procedures, or SOPs as we call them. And, and you have to go through them and know what you're doing to build those SOPs, and then be able to assign them. So I'm pretty sure Will has already created tons of SOPs now that he's been sending to his system admins. And
Yep, and so he has a process and has a solution, and like I said, it's spurned on a few more things internally about how to make this work better. Like he's not the first person to have some issues with it, obviously, but yeah,
exactly.
So, yep. But thanks for the feedback. We appreciate it. And and he said there's other things like the locational log files and configs are not standard on Linux, and a few other things. And I know that you can change the server home directory by setting it in your server.json, and there's other things like that. But again, you have to know, right? If you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah,
And so,
and it's also very customizable, right? So it kind of sometimes will go down to, we try to make it easy for folks and just drop it in the home folder for CommandBox. But you can partition it and do your own, but then you have to document that as well, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a procedure of where things are going to be located, and sometimes making those decisions are hard, right? It's like, where do I put it? Do I just leave it as is? So I totally get it.
But yeah, I mean, it's a good blog post to identify some of those things and make sure you're accounting for them. Otherwise, you might face similar issues. So. Okay,
yes,
well,
sure.
We're running long today, so let me jump to the next one. Let's find a job. So we have 2 new jobs available up on getcfmljobs.com. We have a full-time Cold Fusion developer in Bengaluru, Karnataka, India, and that was posted May 15th. And we also have a full-time Cold Fusion developer, 4 to 6 years of experience, I assume, and that's Mumbai and Bangalore, India, and that was posted on May 11th too. So if you go to getcfmljobs.com, you can see those there. And we also have something from Ortus too, right, Luis?
Yeah, so this is something that it happened today in the morning in our tactical meeting. So we are looking right now for a senior Cold Fusion developer, or actually a senior developer. I don't care about the Cold Fusion portions. I just care that they're awesome developers. So we're going to be posting that pretty soon on the Ortus website and start our rounds of interviews for folks, but we're growing, we're expanding, and we're in need of awesome developers. So if you're listening and you're interested in building tools and changing the world with us, then just apply. You can email at info@ortussolutions.com, and we'll start the interview processes. Our interview processes are pretty strenuous. So maybe we can even do a whole podcast on this, Gavin, but we're very, very picky. We're very extremely detail-oriented when it comes to interviews. We have almost 5 to 6 filters of interviews. It's a long process, lots of exams, lots of tests, and we're sure that people can adapt not only to our culture, which is extremely fast-paced of all the tools that we're building, right? So, but we also want to make sure that it's the right fit. And so, but we're definitely in the lookout right now. So if you're a senior developer and you really want to build really awesome tools and just create and change our Cold Fusion ecosystem, then please apply. Info@ortussolutions.com, and we'll get you started on the interview process. Yes, unfortunately, right now for some of these positions that were open, you have to be either a U.S. citizen, U.S. resident, or green card holder, unfortunately.
Yep. Yeah, there's even a few projects I can't work on just because of different clearances and stuff as well. There's we get some interesting clients too, so yeah, it's fun working for Ortus. I can't say enough about it. So if you're interested, please check that out, and then we'll get the full listing out there as well. So okay.
For Kiwi.
Yep. Okay, so next up we have our ForgeBox module of the week. And this week is a brand new one by Scott Steinbeck. We're doing the CommandBox Convert. So this actually takes a little bit of the power from the SQL command we mentioned earlier, but CommandBox Convert is a module for working with Excel and CSV data, and it uses the amazing lucee-spreadsheet created by Julian Halliwell, which he's always rolling out updates to, so it's working pretty neat.
Yeah,
But
cool.
it allows you to handle some common use cases for working like table-like data from CSV, Excel, or any other JSON-like things, so array of arrays, array of structs, JSON file type stuff. And so you can convert several different formats. Let me bring up the website for those watching. So on ForgeBox, you can see it converts CSVs to serialized query for use in piping to other commands, converts table to data to Excel, to CSV, to JSON, PDF. Yeah, it's pretty neat. And so he's got some examples down here, but you can see that SQL command in here as well. So you can basically take something and then actually, basically take it, do a query on it and then export it to CSV or XLS, JSON, and here you have a command where he takes an input file, first row is header is true, then he selects the ID and name, then he exports it to cities, and outputs an Excel file, and then where the name is not equal to Tom, and then exports it to a POI list. So pretty neat type of command line
Love
functionality. Yeah.
Yeah, I love these kinds of tools. So I know Scott has been kicking it, man, with all these additions and contributions to CommandBox. So thank you so much, Scott. We really appreciate it, man. And
Yeah.
keep creating cool stuff, man. We really need it. We really need people building all these cool modules and contributing to our ecosystem. We definitely need it.
Yeah. That's why we like to spotlight them here on the show too, because like that might be something you'd need, but you'd never know existed unless you looked at it or watched the podcast. So yeah, so very cool. And then something else, our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. This is something that you told me about, and it's been in this product since 2019, and I didn't even know about it. So. So basically there's a screencast mode built into VS Code, and I've seen it. I didn't even know, but I've seen it before and just didn't realize. But so yeah, you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, I use it all the time now for build, when I'm doing the screencasts, actually. So it highlights your mouse, it makes it bigger, it gives you nice little effects and highlights your code. All these neat little things that you need basically, or that multiple editing tools, give you, like Camtasia after the fact, right? But this is actually doing it within, just using VS Code. So really recommend it if you're building screencasts, or even if you're just presenting code reviews with your fellow developers. Go into screencast mode, just press Alt Shift, Command Shift P, go and say screencast. And you can toggle it in and out, and you'll see it's pretty cool. I use it all the time for my screencasts or code reviews with the team. Really recommend it.
Yep, I'm sharing the link here to one of the videos where someone just walks through it, but it's kind of cool. It highlights your mouse too when you're clicking and moving around, and then the typing, and then there's even settings too. So if you want the font size to be bigger or smaller for the letters you're typing, it'll stay on the screen longer or whatnot. But yeah, pretty cool little tip there, and yeah, I'll definitely be using that when I make some more screencasts and when we're presenting at conferences and whatnot. Definitely sounds like a big winner there. So very cool. So last but not least, we want to thank our awesome Patreon sponsors. Again, we mentioned without them we wouldn't be able to make this podcast, and they're supporting this podcast, but also our other products: CommandBox, ForgeBox, ColdBox, TestBox, all the other boxes. Like all the cloud infrastructure that ForgeBox, package management, CommandBox stuff relies on is all paid through Ortus, and this is supporting Ortus do those types of things. So you can find out more on patreon.com/OrtusSolutions. And remember, now you have perks as being a Patreon supporter. There's your own private forum access on the community website, so on the Ortus community site. And you even have a special little profile badge on the community website too. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, we got for bronze packages and up, you can now get a ForgeBox Pro account for free and a CFCast subscription for free, all because you're a bronze package Patreon supporter. So, pretty cool. And your guess is where did he go?
Yogesh should be there, Yogesh. They remove you?
Well, this picture, if you're watching the video, the picture on there may not have been updated as often as the actual main site. But if you go to,
Yogesh is there.
Yeah, if you go to ortusolutions.com/about-us/sponsors, you will see all the pretty faces for those who provided images. Yep. And then we have a pretty big list of people here. So, Luis, you want to read the names, or should I try?
Sure. Why don't we do half? We'll do half, right?
Okay, you go first.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for doing the Patreon. So we really use it for all the open source that we do, and we do a lot of open source. We definitely want to make sure that we can empower everybody in the community, and every little bit helps for sure. Almost funded this whole podcast. Episode 104, which is incredible. Great job, Gavin. And now the subscriptions, right? So we got ForgeBox and CFCasts, and the new ForgeBox is coming. You already saw the sneak preview, and so you're going to get even more. So very excited. So thank you, Don Bellamy, Eric Hoffman, David Belanger, Gary Knight, Giancarlo Gomez, JC, Jonathan Perret, Mario Rodriguez, Jeffrey McGee, John Wilson from Synatrix, Yogesh Matur, there you see, you're there, Yogesh, Joseph Lamery, Ben Nadal, and then I'll give it to Mr. Gavin, finish out the core line.
Okay, what was the last one you said? Sorry, I was just responding to the chat.
Ben Nadal.
Oh, Ben Nadal. Yep, so Brett DeLine, Calvin Stanton, Charlie Earhart, Dan Carr, Daniel Garcia, Tadila Lesnicki, Edgardo Cabezas, Jan Yannick, Jason Diger, Jeff McLean, Jeremy Adams, Jonas Erickson, man, this list is long. Jordan Clark, Kai Koenig, Laxma Tirohadi, and then Leon Saramelis, Matthew Darby, Matthew Clemente, Mingo Hagen, Patrick Flynn, Ross Phillips, Scott Steinbeck, Stephanie Mongi, Stephen Klotz, and Will DeBruhan. If I said it right. Yeah. So thanks everybody, and sorry for anyone who doesn't fit on the picture for the Patreon thing. I'll have to add a couple more rows or something, or columns to make them all fit. Yogesh, we love you. You're still on the list, but you're just not in the picture. Sorry. But yeah, thanks
Maybe
everybody.
We should put just a picture of Yogesh's mustache. Awesome mustache.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, thank you everybody. We really appreciate you guys tuning in, watching live in the chat, or listening via podcast. And yeah, we appreciate all your Patreon supporters and everyone else who supports us with blog posts and bug fixes and documentation. Everything helps. Everything counts. But yeah, go subscribe to YouTube though, because we want to hit that 500, right, Luis?
Yeah, exactly. Go subscribe.
Yep, like and subscribe. Hit the little bell notification. Anyways, thanks everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Well, folks, bye-bye.
Bye. Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernize.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.